Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here, and welcome back to the second day of the National Clean Energy Week Policymakers Symposium. My name is Sean Affelter. I'm Vice President of Government Relations at Crest Forum. Thank you all for joining us here today in person and those watching online. We have an exciting program lined up today. Our expert panelists that you'll hear from will cover some of the hottest topics in clean energy right now, including permitting reform. We'll also dive into the successes and challenges of individual industries like biofuels to nuclear, offshore wind, and hydrogen. We'll learn about electric vehicles, and we'll explore how the government is working with private industry to accelerate clean energy technologies across the country. And of course, we'll hear from several members of Congress and administration officials. A big thank you to our National Clean Energy Week sponsors who support the Policymakers Symposium. We sincerely appreciate your support, and we couldn't do this without you. Like yesterday, we will have networking breaks scattered throughout the day, and lunch will be served at 12 o'clock noon. I also encourage you to download the National Clean Energy Week app so you can interact with our panels and sponsors and stay up to date in all things that are happening both this week and beyond. QR codes are outside of the hall. If you have any questions, feel free to ask members of our team. If you don't know, now you know. Hurricane Helene is bearing down on Georgia and the southeast United States. We were supposed to be joined here this morning by Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, but he had to return late last night to help with the preparation and recovery efforts in Georgia. He sends his sincere regards, and our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Georgia and Florida and throughout the Southeast. However, the good news is that we are joined today by incredible congressional champion, Representative Brett Guthrie. Brett Guthrie represents Kentucky's 2nd Congressional District. He serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee and the Subcommittee on Energy, Climate, and Grid Security. He's a member of the Conservative Climate Caucus, a West Point grad, businessman, and deputy whip of the Republican Conference. Please help me welcome to the stage Representative Brett Guthrie.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. I'm sorry I'm not Governor Kemp. You would have enjoyed his time, but gosh, being an executive of a state, I think all of us understand why somebody can't be here today. And so I guess immediately they started calling around, and my flight's just a little later this morning, so I was able to make it, and glad to be able to do so. And I'm not here campaigning for anything, so I am campaigning, but not here, I guess I should say. But running for chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and will be pivotal to the things that you guys want to do for our role in Congress and public policy solutions that will help us deal with the rising climate issues. And so John Curtis is a good friend of mine. He's going to be a senator from Utah probably in a month. I think it's pretty well said. He's probably going to be the next senator from Utah. And he's a leader on these issues. And he always starts with, I think we all need to sit down with everybody and say, I think we can all agree less carbon is better. So if you just start from that point, less carbon is better. And I agree with that. And so the next thing, you have to have less carbon, but you also need affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy. And that's where we diverge a lot of times between our parties on what the solutions are to make sure we have less carbon. We have to make sure that we maintain access to reliable power. I live in Bowling Green, Kentucky. TVA shut down a coal-fired plant in Paradise. If you're a John Prine fan, you've heard the song. Paradise is in Paradise, Kentucky, where it was a coal-fired plant that actually Peabody Coal actually it was TVA, not Peabody Coal, if you heard the song, that moved the town. But anyway, my point is, during the polar vortex, we had power outages. And we start, of course, it's my job to start figuring out for my local citizens what happened. And they say, well, this kind of peak time, this is where we are. But this is when you need the power the most. When it's below zero, which doesn't typically happen in Kentucky, that's not when you need to have the rolling blackout. They did them rolling blackouts, and they managed it, but it just opened up that we have to have affordable energy and we have to have reliable energy. And a lot of the solutions that people are bringing forward just don't do that. And I like to say, I say that if the polar ice cap didn't exist as of 2017, like Al Gore predicted, or I think they revised that to 2022, and then at 2022, I think they just didn't want to revise it again. I hope nobody remembered they made that prediction. And then, Greta Thunberg has tweeted that in 2018, in 5 years, if we use fossil fuels, the Earth, you're not going to be inhabitable on the Earth. Well, it's 2024. So if those catastrophic predictions that just are not accurate and get the headlines and seem to drive the news, make people make policy decisions that are disruptive to people. Look at Europe. The power in Europe is 3 times as much as here in the United States. My family's in the automotive manufacturing business. We compete and have friends in the same industry in Germany, and they don't think they can keep their doors open and compete in the world because of decisions their government made on power. And so, if you look at, I think if you took every 435 members of Congress and sat in the room and said, should we beat the Chinese to 6G? Every single member in the room would say yes. I think every single member would say yes. If we say we want to be the biggest driver, one of the biggest drivers, I'll say the biggest, one of the biggest drivers of beating them to 6G is access to energy. Would you be open to some of the energy policies that make sure it's affordable and sustainable? It would start falling off. And so we have our where we agree, less carbon, where we agree on we want to beat the Chinese, and where we disagree on how you get there. And so it gets kind of the meat of what I want to talk to you about. It gets back to kind of like population control when I was a kid. So I'm 60, I was born in 1964. In the 1970s, if you're a kid, they scared you about population control. So the Weekly Reader, which I don't know if it even exists anymore, you got population control. And there was a guy named Paul Ehrlich writes essentially an Earth in the Balance kind of book about population bomb was the name of it. And the prediction was we're going to go from 3 billion people to 7 billion people by 2020, and the Earth can't sustain that, and people are going to starve to death. So what happened? Well, you have the one-child policy from China that comes out of that. You have Robert McNamara, of all the awful decisions he made as a public official. One, it was a suggestion that was never carried out. But as head of the World Bank, he suggested or floated, maybe we should invest in infrastructure and healthcare in Africa because people are just going to starve to death. I mean, those were the kind of radical, that's up there with Earth's not going to exist in 5 years. That's where polar ice caps are going to be gone in 10 years. Those are those kind of decisions that are comparable. But for those of us, if you don't say you're population deniers, we're not population deniers. The Earth went from 3 billion to 8 billion. They missed it by a factor of 1 billion. But in the same time, we have a surplus of food with fewer people growing it. And the only people that are really hungry is not just getting the food to them, not access to food. Sometimes that's their local governments, but getting food to people is the issue, not having it. And so when you make these bold predictions and you have these radical policies that aren't based in reality, it really affects real people. It affects real people's lives. And so that's where we have to, what you guys do. And I've always thought is if you get the smartest people in a room, or if they just think they're the smartest people in the room, and they want to try to solve problems, they can't understand things they don't know. So they want to solve problems with today's technology because they can't imagine anybody creating anything different. So that's where they want to follow. So it's like wind and solar. Well, we know wind and solar is not affordable unless it's subsidized, and it's not reliable. It is part of the mix. It is absolutely part of the mix. I'm not dismissing that, but it's not baseload power. It's not baseload power. And so those kind of decisions happen. And it gets back to, I was reading on the Wright brothers back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, really the late 1890s. There was just a big push across the world, across America, Brazil, and here, I guess across the world, for space flight, to where the Smithsonian was given prizes. So MIT was like working on the airplane, And you can see the old films of, you see them launched off in the Potomac where they go off, big catapult, and they fall right down into the water. The old umbrella that's pumping up and down. Everybody who's my age at least have seen those videos. And two brothers, one who had yellow fever, were very mechanically inclined, thank goodness, but they made bicycles. As we know the story, one had yellow fever, laid on the back porch for the summer, watching birds fly. And he made the leap that brought us to where we are. He said, well, maybe it's not power, getting in the air, it's lift. It's staying in the air. And once we figure out how to stay in the air, we can get in the air. That was two brothers who were mechanical bicycle makers. And so what you guys work on and what you guys do, that's what's going to solve the problem. Well, how do you think we're going to solve the climate issue? I said, I have faith that people are going to solve it. And so what do you do in the meantime? If you're just going to shut down baseload power, if you have power plants that have active life on them, and you're going to shut down baseload power because you're perceiving that because of decisions like 2017, the polar ice caps aren't going to exist, then it's going to set our country back. Europe's already done it to themselves, and we need to not do this to ourselves, because who's not doing it? It's China. China is building baseload power at a rapid rate. The reason I focus on that is because I was in Seattle talking to people at Microsoft and some other places. But a Microsoft data center uses as much power as the city of Seattle. Now you're seeing people like Microsoft say, well, maybe we need to buy our own power sources. They're talking about making their own power sources because the grid and the power sources we have today can't support what they want to do. We've had a generation of flat demand for power. Now we have an exponential demand for power in this coming generation. At the same time, we're limiting supply. So if you limit supply, increase demand, you can have a high school economics education. You know what that means. Either you get shortages, some blackouts, or you get exponential price. And it's not fair to the American people to raise their power costs. And you can't solve big problems by asking people to go backwards. You can't say, well, society, we're going to step back because we're going to solve a big problem. That if you'd have done that in 2008 to save the polar ice caps, we saved the ice caps by not doing it. And so that's what I hopefully will be able to do as leader of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Hopefully what you guys will be able to do is understand that we have to empower entrepreneurs and thinkers and to innovate our way around it. Just to say we're going to stop making the internal combustion car by 2032. I mean, California's already got those kind of rules in place. I mean, it's just incredibly disruptive. It's incredibly inefficient. And in the end, does it really save what they're trying to save? And I think that's questionable. So why take those drastic steps when it's questionable? And so are you really trying to get less carbon in the atmosphere? You're trying an agenda. And is the agenda getting rid of fossil fuels because you just don't like fossil fuels for whatever reason? So I almost was wonder if we could find a way to have coal-fired plants that produce zero carbon in the atmosphere, which is sequestration and others, would you be for that? And I would tell you, I would bet a lot of my friends wouldn't be for that because they're just against coal. And so for a good example of that would be all the bets on EVs, if you did plug-in hybrids, this technology we know is out there and is already being adapted. Well, what do plug-in hybrids do? Well, if you're driving around town, you're on electricity, so you don't produce carbon when you drive around town. Most people drive around town. So it really lowers the carbon produced by automobiles. But if you're going to have to drive cross-country or somewhere, you have access to gasoline. But to have plug-in hybrids, you have to maintain the internal combustion engine. And if they want to get rid of the internal combustion engine, then they can't do plug-in hybrids, even though that's probably better. That's a doable solution for increasing carbon. And so those are the fights that we're going to have. And the fights are going to be, let's agree that we all want a better environment. We all want a better world. But let's make sure that we don't force people to take steps backwards in the progressive standard of living because we're here in the ivory tower, think it's just the best thing for you. And a great example, I just came across this actually yesterday. I didn't know, but in February, they were looking in Norway, outside of Norway, the Baltics, to plant, to do windmills, wind turbines. And so they're surveying the ocean floor, and they discovered there was a civilization under the Baltics. Just in the Stone Ages, maybe 11,000 years ago. I didn't see it. Somebody told me that. I went and searched it just to make sure it was actually accurate. I can't believe I didn't hear about it. It was in February 24, CNN reported it. And so, wow, was that rising sea levels? The bottom of the Baltic. So in the last 130 years, the last 11,000 years, the sea level's gone from at least that point to where the floor of the Baltics are now. And civilization didn't get wiped out. People are smart. People adapt. People can make things happen. And so we don't need policymakers setting us back. What we need is entrepreneurs to be unleashed to move us forward. And that's what I hope to do with a conscience on the environment, a conscience on climate, but also with confidence that the American people are going to figure it out. And if we don't do it, somebody else will. And we want to be the leaders. And that's the policy I'm going to help put forth, that we lead. So thanks for having me here today. Sorry I'm not Governor Kemp. Sort of thoughts and prayers for the people of Florida and Georgia. In Tennessee, it's actually going to come through Kentucky. By the time it gets to us, it's just a lot of rain. So we should be fine unless it sets over Appalachia, and that's a different world. If it sets over my world, Hurricane Ivan came through. And at like this 39 inches in Houston, we had about 8 inches by the time it got to Kentucky. Think how far Houston is from Kentucky. And I live in Bowling Green, so I live near Mammoth Cave. And I had a friend call, and he goes, well, I just saw all this rain. Are you okay? Now, it floods in Kentucky. I'm not saying it doesn't, particularly Appalachia. We had it last year. It's horrific. I said, my area doesn't really flood. It drains. It drains really, really well. Our concern is it creates new drains. So we have neighbors that have sinkholes in their yard and all around. So those are the thoughts on our minds, and I have. But so pray for the people of Florida and Georgia and all the others. And sorry, Governor Kemp couldn't be here, but I'm glad to be here because I want you to know with this thought that our committee is going to be open to solutions that we think is going to solve our climate issues, but also unleash the technology and ingenuity of the American people. And that's what's going to solve the problem. And that's what's going to keep America moving forward. So thanks for having me here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman Guthrie. We'll now have a brief networking time before our next scheduled programming panel on permitting reform, which will begin at 10 o'clock. Go out, grab some coffee, start up a few conversations, and we'll see you here back soon.